Ambassador Luis Gallegos, former Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ecuador and currently President of Board of Trustees at UNITA. Welcome to AnewZ. Thank you very much indeed for this absolutely fascinating and historic opportunity, if I may say so.
Thank you, most kind. It's an honor and a pleasure to be in Azerbaijan and in this meeting.
Thank you very much indeed. I assume we're going to have a very wide-ranging discussion. Of course, today's event, today's forum, this inaugural Global South NGO Forum and the Global South NGO Platform, which has been effectively created today, will be the subject of our discussion. But I would like to begin our conversation with a broader theme about Global South. We understand the historic roots that lie at the heart of this notion, but still, today, we understand definition is quite loose, but still, not in one word, but in a nutshell, how would you describe the geography entailing what we know as Global South?
I think the concept of is not necessarily a geographical one of North or South. It's the concept of development, of decolonization, of a historic change in the world, and where the United Nations, created in 1945 by 55 countries, became an organization of 193 countries. And where one of the actual divisions was development and the capabilities of becoming a developed country for the welfare of its society and its people. I think the concept is how you look into a very competitive world in a very challenging international circumstance, in where countries that have these elements of institutional needs and democratic progression can be allocated into one group or the other. And that fundamentally is what we're talking about here. We're talking about a platform for the non-governmental organizations of the Global South to create a fair and equitable world, which is an aspiration, I agree, but also the exchange of views, of experiences, of knowledge, of culture that can make us viable to meet the challenges of the international community as of today. Many challenges that can only be met collectively.
And when the UN was created after the Second World War, and it was back then and still regarded as one of the most important achievements of humanity. It was after war, dreadful war, two great wars, with Europe being tatters, and effectively there was a need for consolidation. Do you think that originally the UN system was sufficiently inclusive of the aspirations of those countries that were not in the global north, they were not former imperial powers, but also was very open to embrace those countries which today are classified as global south?
I can tell you that in 1945, the consensus was that the world had enough deaths to make an effort to create an organization that would fundamentally look for peace amongst nations. This has changed. In the 80 years since the creation of the United Nations, from the 55 that original founders of the United Nations, were 193 countries in the membership. The decolonization of a majority of it, and even the separation of nation states has gotten to 193 members. Probably there are more to come into the realm. I think the aspiration and what the Charter means for us now and meant then was the need for three pillars. One was security, that we would avoid war, we would have peace, and I think in the 80 years we've managed to have that pillar up to a very important part, not completely. Economic development for the prosperity of others and the respect for human rights. Those were the three anchor pillars of the organization. As we have evolved socially, the organization has to have a significant reform. A significant reform that will permit it to comply with the needs of security, the need of not having war, because we are living two wars, one in Europe and one in the Middle East, and 60-odd conflicts around the world that are not solvable by the UN Security Council. And the interlockage of this mechanism of the Security Council has to be amplified to incorporate others. In the economic sphere, we need a clear vision of what we're talking about in international relations, fundamentally trade and access to markets. I think there is a reversal at the present moment, and we are in a radical inconsistency or in a radical uncertainty that we don't know where we are going in the sense of trade as we had negotiated in the last decades. On the issue of what we are doing in Baku now, I think the platform is a very important tool for the majority of countries in the world, which conform what we call the Global South, to meet those challenges. And I can specifically mention a few of them. Climate change. Climate change is an international factor which has to be dealt with internationally. The solutions can't be done nationally because this is a trans-frontier issue. Also, issues like the pandemic has shown us the incapabilities of the world to meet the needs of situations of that type. It taught us an enormous lesson to us all because it put our lives in danger, and it meant the incapabilities of the national state and the multilateral organizations to confront an issue like this. We're still living the pandemic, although we, for cognitive dissonance, practically avoid talking about it. But the consequences of the pandemic, both in social, economic, cultural aspects, have permeated all the societies. And I think that is a very important analysis that the world has to do yet of the consequences that we are living now because of that phenomenon.
And do you think that the examination of those consequences made us more conscious of being in the direction of working for the sake of consolidation, or do you think that it created more, as I call it, multipolarity? So effectively, you face a challenge which is beyond the scope of one nation. It requires universal consolidation. But at times, quite often what you notice because of those differences, instead of having one collective response, you have fragmented responses leading to not cohesive multilateralism but multipolarities. In the context of this particular debate, do you see the world on the verge of further consolidation to meet the challenge, or you see with the rise of sort of regional actors, with different actors playing even more coercive role, more fragmentation?
I see more fragmentation. I see a regression of access to markets. I see a regression in international compliance with international law. I see a fracture in regions, a division of trade in different concepts. We had worked for a globalization of trade and access to markets with supply chains in this, which is being disrupted at the moment. I don't think that there is a reversal to what was happening before this. This is a process that took practically 80 years. I mean, since 1947, when we established the GATT, and then we went to WTO, we had a consolidation of a sequence of measures that would take us into accessible markets that I feel are now closing. And that has broad implications in social effects, not only in employment, in poverty, and in hunger. It also has in conflict, because in many of the cases, this will provoke a level of uncertainty that can lead to conflict. I worry about the capabilities of the world of confronting these new challenges in a viable and intelligent sense. We are very emotional human beings that react to different stimulus, and I think at the present moment There is an uncertainty, which I would rather call a radical uncertainty, of what the next steps are in consolidating a world which we would like to see a cohesive, as you said, in the concept. I doubt that we will have that in the near future.
Yeah, there are those who doubt that eventuality, which could be classified, termed as consolidation. And in the midst of all of these developments that we are talking about, what sort of bearing will it have on the central UN institution, you think? For example, the Security Council, those big 5 countries, they were quite big and consequential back in 1945, after the war, of course. United States, well, Britain, France, they no longer have the self-same qualities. I mean, talked about those 2 European countries. China is, of course, rising, and you've got Russia there. Bearing in mind that a lot has changed over the past 80 years, and that UN Security Council construct was reflective of the balance of power applicable to that time, do you think there will be more calls on changing central institutions of the UN as well?
Well, let me tell you that I in the year 2003, was the facilitator for the reform of the Security Council, 20 or more years ago. I spent a year consulting the members of the United Nations on the reform of the Security Council. It went from 10 to 15 non-permanent members. It went to 15 total members, 5 of them the countries you just mentioned, who were the victorious powers of the Second World War. I think that it needs an incorporation of other important elements, and both from Africa, from Asia, from other continents, from Latin America, that would represent the membership that we have now, from the 55 original to the 193 we have now. Reaching agreement, reaching consensus in the United Nations is one of the most difficult issues, because you have the opposition of 1 or 2 or 3, and this is a blockage. I believe the United Nations needs a profound reform in order to meet the challenges. Most of the people of the world have a true belief that a multilateral organization is needed, but the United Nations is considered a failing mechanism because it can't resolve the problem of Ukraine. It can't resolve the problem of Gaza. It cannot resolve the problem of 60 other conflicts around the world, from Congo to Sudan to Asia. We see deaths in our television screens every day. We have not been able as humanity to contain these acts of violence for which the United Nations was created originally. We see a level of prosperity in being able to have a discourse in the world of free trade and the creation of multipolar productive sectors, that we are seeing a regression now with the American isolationism in trade. We see issues of technology that we require to understand and use for peaceful and prosperity. But we also see the need to rein in criminality, corruption, violence against those that are most vulnerable fundamentally. We have a demographic problem which is key to my understanding of what the world will be. We are 1 billion persons who are aging. We are more aging than children being born. In 25 years, by the year 2050, we will be 2 billion people aging. Normally, the United Nations calculates 2 persons as a direct impact group for every person aging. So we will be a cohort of 6 billion people in 25 years, with a dramatic demographic shift, with enormous economic, social consequences. And we are not dealing with this in the context of what is the future, immediate future. We don't have to wait 200 years for this. This is in our border. We know climate is affecting us all. The changes are dramatic from the issue of the tremendous effects on climate phenomenon, to refugees. But we are in the incapacity of dealing with dialogue, with equitable representation, with intelligent solutions to deal with this. We have people pulling out of the Paris Accord in the middle of negating climate. So we are confronting the incapacity of human beings of getting together and being able to solve problems in a discourse of consensus.
Indeed, indeed. Well, thank you very much indeed. And perhaps my last question will be about to what extent NGOs could play an important role in solving some of the key issues. We understand that the UN needs to be reformed. We talk about that organizations, intergovernmental bodies within the UN, but there's another world where government actors are not there. There are non-government actors, NGOs. Do you think that debate between NGOs could be even more inclusive than the debate involving government when it comes to understanding issues better, without any government agenda, backing any narrative, and to find a better solution? It's another question whether that solution will be implemented or not, of course. But there's a sense of hope that this world of NGOs, could actually provide a platform for in-depth, fair, inclusive discussion, providing good enough reason for governments to take right actions.
I think when you talk about civil society or non-governmental organizations, or even the private sectors of countries, I think they have to be involved actively in looking for solutions, in guiding the process of governments, in being able to contribute to government solutions, to public policy. Understanding the root causes of this is fundamentally what we're talking about. A society that is active and intelligent enough to communicate this to the decision makers. If you have a collaborative affair in a democracy where you have a vibrant civil society which would contribute with its criticisms, with its knowledge, with its culture, with its capabilities, to address public policy in a way that we save resources, avoid corruption, do justice, have fair and equitable representation, I think the governance of the world would be much better. What do we have in the international community of the non-governmental organizations? An exchange of views that is important, an exchange of experiences that can contribute to those public policy solutions. But we also have a participation of the individual root causes of, and going back to the people who are on the ground to look for solutions that are viable. I think one of the problems we have in countries like mine or in the developing world is that we do not ask the people what they want. We assume what they want. And we look at this from a vertical viewpoint, from a cloud down, and say this must be good. But we still have to go back to the causes and the roots of our culture and the solutions of millennium that many of these ancestral societies have to look for viable solutions. I find that in many cases the activism of civil society is misunderstood. Sometimes it can be misguided. Sometimes it could be politically influenced. But I believe that the contribution of this network, and especially I am very confident in the participation of the private sector, of the productive sector, enabled to look at the world from a more ample view of competing in a world which is very, very hard to do in the context of what we have in the international rivalries that we meet, because we will be challenged and we will lose markets and we will lose capabilities of production which are redundant to our capabilities of welfare, fairness, and the welfare of our states and our peoples.
Let's hope that before it's too late we will come to the point of some form of consolidation, because as we say, it's one way of having crisis and reacting to it, another way actually avoiding the crisis of great magnitude in the first place by taking right action in a timely fashion.
Exactly. I think that if you perceive as a statesman the future of what your nation state, which are not autocracies. Because a nation state now is an international participant in the world community which is extremely dynamic, with a communication system that is irreversible and instantaneous, with a knowledge base that is very critical of what you can form your knowledge base and your criteria and your beliefs even. So I think we are in the front lines of an extraordinary change, which could be better for our world if we manage it intelligently and we are able to consolidate consensus and dialogue.
Ambassador Luis Gallegos, former Foreign Minister of Ecuador and currently President of Board of Trustees at UNITA. I'm so grateful to you for your time and for your very, very interesting answers and for this delightful conversation on the whole.
Thank you very much. Most kind.
Thank you.